The train lurched to a stop in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and Dorothy Lambert pressed her gloved hand against the steamed window, wondering if she had made the biggest mistake of her life coming here to marry a man she had never met. At 24 years old, most people back in Boston considered her a spinster, too plain and too practical to ever capture a man's attention. And the scar that ran from her right eyebrow to her temple from a childhood accident only seemed to confirm what everyone whispered behind her back. She gathered her worn carpetbag and stepped onto the platform, scanning the crowd for a man holding a sign with her name. The September heat pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, so different from the crisp autumn air she had left behind. Men in dusty work clothes moved past her, their boots heavy on the wooden planks. Women in simple cotton dresses hurried by with baskets on their arms, but no one approached her, no one even looked her way. An hour passed. Then two. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and Dorothy felt the familiar weight of disappointment settling into her chest like an old friend. Of course, Harold Patterson had not come to meet her. Why would he? She had sent him an honest photograph, had described herself truthfully in her letters, had warned him that she was no beauty. He must have taken one look at that picture and decided he would rather face life alone than with a woman like her. She sat down on a bench near the station house, blinking back tears. She had spent every penny she had on the train ticket. There was nothing left for a return journey, and even if there had been, what would she return to? The cramped boarding house room where she worked herself to exhaustion sewing garments for wealthy women who looked through her as though she were invisible. The endless lonely nights wondering if this was all life held for her. "Madam, you look like you might need some help." Dorothy looked up to find a tall man standing before her, his hat in his hands. He had dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. A silver star was pinned to his vest, and he wore dusty boots and worn denim pants. He could not have been much older than 30, and something in his expression was kind. "I am waiting for someone," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "but I fear he may not be coming." The man glanced at the carpetbag beside her, at the way she clutched her reticule in her lap. "How long have you been waiting?" "Since the train arrived. About 3 hours now." He frowned and looked around the platform as if expecting someone to materialize. "Who are you waiting for, if you do not mind my asking? I am the deputy here in Fort Smith, so I know most folks." "Name is Russell Kane, Harold Patterson. He placed an advertisement for a wife and I answered it. We have been corresponding for 6 months. The words felt heavy in her mouth, humiliating somehow. Russell's expression shifted, something like pity crossing his features before he quickly masked it. "Madam, I am real sorry to tell you this, but Harold Patterson died about 2 weeks ago. Got thrown from his horse and broke his neck. It was quick, at least." The words hit her like a physical blow. Dorothy could not even summon surprise, only a deep weariness. "I see. Did you travel far, Boston?" Russell let out a low whistle. "That is a long way to come." He hesitated, then sat down on the bench beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "You got family back there? Someone who could wire you money for a return ticket?" "No. No family. I saved for 8 months to afford the journey here." Dorothy looked down at her hands. "I suppose I will need to find work. Is there a boarding house in town that might have a room I could afford?" "Mrs. Henderson runs a decent place on Garrison Avenue, but rooms do not come cheap. And I have got to be honest with you, jobs for women are scarce around here. Most of the respectable positions are already filled." He paused, studying her face. "You any good with numbers or letters?" "I can read and write well. I kept the books for the seamstress shop where I worked in Boston." Russell nodded slowly, as if making a decision. "The school teacher here just left to get married, moved up to Kansas with her husband. The town has been looking for someone to take over the school. Pay is not much, about $30 a month, but it comes with a small cabin behind the schoolhouse. Job starts in 2 weeks, but the cabin is empty now if you need a place to stay. Hope flickered in Dorothy's chest, fragile and unfamiliar. Why would you help me? You do not even know me. Because it is the right thing to do, Russell said simply, and because I know what it is like to feel like you do not belong anywhere. He stood up and offered her his hand. Come on, let me show you the place and you can decide if you want it. Dorothy took his hand and let him help her to her feet. His palm was warm and calloused, and he released her hand quickly, as though he were afraid of overstepping. They walked through the dusty streets of Fort Smith, past the storefronts and saloons, past the courthouse where Judge Parker held his infamous trials. Russell pointed out landmarks as they went, his voice steady and calm, telling her about the town and its people. The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building with 6 windows and a bell tower. The cabin behind it was small but clean, with a single room that held a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a cast iron stove. Someone had left firewood stacked neatly beside the door. It is not much, Russell said, setting her carpet bag down just inside the door. But it is dry and the roof does not leak. I will talk to the mayor tomorrow about getting you officially hired on. For tonight, I will send someone over with some food and supplies to get you started. I do not know how to thank you, Dorothy said, her voice thick with emotion. This is more kindness than I have experienced in a very long time. Russell put his hat back on and tipped it to her. Welcome to Fort Smith, Miss Lambert. I hope it treats you better than Boston did. After he left, Dorothy sat down on the bed and finally let the tears come. But they were not entirely tears of sadness. Mixed in with the grief and disappointment was something else, something that felt almost like hope. True to his word, Russell sent a young boy over that evening with a basket containing bread, cheese, dried beef, coffee, and even a jar of preserves. The next morning, Dorothy woke early and walked through the schoolhouse, taking stock of what she would need. The room had been left in decent order, with slates and chalk stored in a cabinet, and a stack of worn primers on the teacher's desk. She found a broom and set about sweeping the floors, washing the windows, arranging the desks into neat rows. She was standing on a chair trying to reach a high shelf when Russell appeared in the doorway, making her startle. Sorry, did not mean to scare you, he said quickly. I talked to Mayor Harrison this morning. He is pleased to offer you the teaching position officially. School starts the Monday after next, and you will have about 20 students, ages 6 through 14. Some of them are a bit rough around the edges, but they are good kids mostly. Dorothy climbed down from the chair, smoothing her skirt. Thank you, Deputy Kane. I will do my best not to disappoint, call me Russell, and I have got no doubt you will do fine. He looked around the schoolroom, taking in the clean floors and organized supplies. You have been busy. I like to keep occupied. It helps me think less about things I cannot change. Russell nodded as if he understood that impulse perfectly. Listen, I know you do not know anyone in town yet, and it occurred to me that you might benefit from some introductions. There is a church social tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, just food and conversation. I could escort you there if you like, introduce you around. Might help you feel less like a stranger. The offer was unexpected and generous. Dorothy found herself studying Russell's face, looking for hidden motives or mockery, but his gray eyes were sincere. You have already done so much for me. I do not wish to impose on your time. It would not be an imposition. Truth is, I do not much enjoy going to those things alone either. People mean well, but every widow and mother in town sees me as a project that needs fixing. He gave her a small smile. Maybe if I show up with you, they will leave me be for one evening." Dorothy surprised herself by returning his smile. "In that case, I accept. What time should I be ready?" "I will come by around 6 tomorrow evening. It is just a short walk from here to the church." After Russell left, Dorothy found herself thinking about him as she continued her work in the schoolhouse. There was something solid about him, something steady and reliable. He seemed like the kind of man who meant what he said and did what he promised. It was a quality she had rarely encountered in people. The next evening, she took extra care with her appearance, pinning her brown hair into a neat bun and wearing her best dress, a simple blue cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. She could do nothing about the scar on her face, so she stopped trying to hide it. When Russell arrived precisely at 6, dressed in clean clothes with his hair freshly combed, his expression told her that he found nothing wrong with how she looked. "You look very nice," he said, and the compliment seemed genuine rather than merely polite. The church social was held in a large room beside the church itself. Long tables were loaded with food that the women of the town had prepared, and people clustered in small groups, talking and laughing. When Dorothy entered with Russell, several heads turned and conversations paused. Russell seemed unbothered by the attention. He kept one hand lightly at her elbow as he guided her through the room, making introductions. She met Mayor Harrison, a portly man with kind eyes who welcomed her warmly to Fort Smith. She met Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, and Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who owned the general store. She met farmers and their wives, the blacksmith, the doctor, the minister. Most people were polite, though she caught some of the women whispering behind their hands and shooting curious glances her way. Dorothy tried not to let it bother her. She was used to being the subject of whispers. "Do not mind them," Russell said quietly as he handed her a plate of food. "They are just curious. It is not every day someone new comes to town, especially someone who has traveled as far as you have." They found seats at one of the tables, and Russell introduced her to his friends. There was Tom Miller, a rancher about Russell's age who had a booming laugh and an easy manner. There was Samuel Brooks, who worked at the courthouse and had a quiet intensity about him. And there was Jack Foster, who ran the telegraph office and seemed to know everyone's business. "So you are the mail-order bride who got stood up by a dead man," Jack said with characteristic bluntness, earning him a sharp look from Russell. "Jack," Russell said, his voice carrying a warning, but Dorothy just smiled, surprising herself with her own boldness. "Yes, that is me. Though I prefer to think of myself as the new schoolteacher now." Jack laughed and raised his coffee cup in salute. "I like her. She has got spine." The evening passed more pleasantly than Dorothy had expected. The food was good, and Russell's friends included her in their conversations without making her feel like an outsider. She learned that Russell had been a Texas Ranger before coming to Fort Smith, that he had lost his wife and infant son to fever 4 years ago, that he had thrown himself into his work as a way to cope with the grief. "I am sorry," Dorothy said quietly when Tom mentioned it. "I lost my parents when I was young. I know how grief can hollow you out." Russell met her eyes across the table and something passed between them, a recognition of shared pain. "It gets easier," he said. "Not better exactly, just easier to carry." "Yes," Dorothy agreed. "That is exactly right." As the social wound down and people began to leave, Russell walked Dorothy back to her cabin. The September night was cooler than the day had been, and a million stars spread across the sky above them. Their footsteps echoed on the wooden sidewalk. "Thank you for taking me tonight," Dorothy said when they reached her door. "Everyone was very welcoming and I enjoyed meeting your friends. They liked you too. Tom told me he thinks you will be good for the town." Russell hesitated, then added, "I think so too. You barely know me." I know enough. I know you are brave, coming all this way on your own. I know you are strong, the way you handled learning about Patterson without falling apart. I know you are not afraid of hard work, seeing how you have already got that schoolhouse in better shape than it has been in years. He met her eyes. That is enough for me to know I was right to help you. Dorothy felt warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling she could not quite name. You are a good man, Russell Kane. I try to be. He tipped his hat to her. Good night, Miss Lambert. I will see you around town. She watched him walk away into the darkness, his tall figure eventually disappearing around a corner. Then she went inside and sat down at her table, touching her fingers to her lips and wondering what was happening to her heart. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Dorothy spent her days getting the schoolhouse ready, reviewing the primers and planning lessons. She made more friends in town, particularly Mrs. Chen, who often invited her to have tea at the general store and shared stories about Fort Smith's history. Dorothy learned that the town was a gateway to the frontier, that Judge Parker tried criminals from Indian Territory, that the streets sometimes saw violence, but that good people were working to build something better here. Russell stopped by the schoolhouse almost every day, usually with some excuse about checking to make sure she was safe or bringing her something she might need. He brought her a better lamp for the schoolhouse when he noticed her old one smoking. He repaired one of the windows that stuck. He brought her books from his own collection, saying he thought the students might enjoy them. Dorothy found herself looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. They would talk for hours sometimes, about everything and nothing. Russell told her about his work, about tracking down outlaws and keeping the peace. She told him about Boston, about her lonely life there, about the dreams she had given up on long ago. What dreams? Russell asked one afternoon as they sat on the steps of the schoolhouse, watching the sun sink lower in the sky. Dorothy hesitated, then decided to be honest. Foolish ones. I dreamed of having a family, a home, someone who looked at me and saw something worth loving. But I am not the kind of woman who inspires those feelings in men. Russell turned to look at her, his expression serious. Why would you say that? Because it is true. I am plain, I have this scar. I am too practical, too quiet, too ordinary. Men want women who are beautiful and charming and exciting. I have never been any of those things. Dorothy. The way he said her name, soft and firm at the same time, made her look at him. You are wrong. You are not plain. You have beautiful eyes and a smile that lights up your whole face when you let yourself really smile. That scar just shows that you survived something, and there is nothing ugly about that. And as for being practical and quiet, those are not flaws. They are signs of a thoughtful, steady person, someone a man could build a life with. Her breath caught in her throat. Russell, I am not saying this right. He looked away, running a hand through his hair in frustration. What I mean is, any man would be lucky to have you. Harold Patterson was a fool not to see that, and the men in Boston were blind. And what about you? The words slipped out before Dorothy could stop them. Do you see it? Russell stood up abruptly, putting his hat back on. I should go. You have got a big day tomorrow, first day of school and all. You will do great. He left before she could say anything else, and Dorothy sat there on the steps feeling like she had ruined something precious and fragile. But beneath the regret was a flutter of hope, because Russell had not said no. He had just said he had to go. The first day of school went better than Dorothy had dared to hope. Her students were a mix of ages and abilities, but they were eager to learn. There was little Emma Harrison, the mayor's daughter, who could already read at age 7. There was Michael Foster, Jack's nephew, who struggled with his letters but excelled at mathematics. There was tall, serious Sarah Chen, 15 years old and preparing to help her parents run the store. And there was young Billy Cooper, a wild 8-year-old who seemed determined to test Dorothy's patience at every turn. By the end of the first week, Dorothy had established a rhythm and routine. She discovered that she loved teaching, loved seeing the moment when understanding lit up a child's face, loved the challenge of finding different ways to explain concepts until every student grasped them. Russell stopped by on Friday afternoon after the students had gone home. "How did your first week go?" "Better than I expected. The children are wonderful, even the challenging ones." Dorothy smiled. "Billy Cooper tried to put a frog in Sarah Chen's desk today, but she caught him and made him write an essay about amphibians as punishment." "I think she may be a better teacher than I am." Russell laughed, and the sound made Dorothy's heart skip. "Billy is a handful, but he means well. His father died last year and his mother is struggling to keep him in line. I will keep an extra eye on him." Dorothy gathered her books and prepared to lock up the schoolhouse. "Are you patrolling tonight?" "No, actually. I was wondering if you might like to have dinner at the hotel restaurant. They serve a decent steak on Friday nights, and I thought you might enjoy a meal you did not have to cook yourself." It was not a subtle invitation, and Dorothy found herself blushing. "Are you asking me to have dinner with you?" "Yes, if you want to. If you do not, that is fine too." "I just thought I would love to have dinner with you." The relief on Russell's face was obvious. "Good. That is good. I will pick you up at 7. The hotel restaurant was the finest establishment in Fort Smith, with white tablecloths and real china plates. Dorothy felt self-conscious in her simple dress, but Russell seemed proud to be seen with her. They ordered steaks and potatoes and talked about everything under the sun. Dorothy learned that Russell had grown up on a ranch in Texas, that he had become a ranger to escape the grief after his wife died, that he had come to Fort Smith a year ago looking for something quieter than ranger work. "You still miss her?" Dorothy asked gently. "Your wife?" "Every day," Russell admitted. "But the missing has changed. It used to feel like I was drowning in it. Now it is more like an old wound that aches sometimes. I will always love her, and I will always wish things had been different. But I am learning that loving someone you lost does not mean you cannot love again." His eyes held hers as he said it, and Dorothy felt her pulse quicken. "Russell, what are we doing here?" "I am having dinner with a woman I admire very much. A woman I would like to know better if she will let me." "I am not what you need," Dorothy said, even though it hurt to say it. "You deserve someone whole, someone who has not given up on life the way I had. Dorothy, look at me." Russell reached across the table and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. "You did not give up. You got on a train and traveled halfway across the country to start over. You turned a disaster into an opportunity. You walked into a schoolhouse and made it your own. You are one of the bravest people I know, and I have known some pretty brave people." "I am terrified," she confessed in a whisper. "I am terrified of wanting this, of wanting you, because every time I have wanted something in my life, it has been taken away. I know. I am terrified too, but maybe we can be terrified together." He squeezed her hand gently. "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow or make any promises you are not ready for. I am just asking if I can court you properly, take you to dinner sometimes, walk you home from church, see where this goes." Dorothy took a shaky breath. "Yes, yes, I would like that very much." Russell's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Then we have an understanding." They finished their dinner in comfortable silence, and Russell walked her home slowly, as if he wanted to stretch out the evening as long as possible. At her door, he took both her hands in his. "Thank you for saying yes," he said. "I will do my best to make sure you never regret it." "I do not think I could regret anything involving you," Dorothy said, surprising herself with her own boldness. Russell leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to. When she did not move, he pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, his lips warm against her skin. "Good night, Dorothy." "Good night, Russell." She watched him walk away again, but this time the feeling in her chest was not confusion or uncertainty. It was joy. The courtship that followed was everything Dorothy had dreamed of but never expected to experience. Russell was attentive without being overbearing, romantic without being silly, honest without being harsh. He brought her wildflowers he picked on his patrols. He sat in the back of her schoolroom sometimes and watched her teach, his expression full of admiration. He took her on picnics by the Arkansas River and told her stories about his childhood. Dorothy found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone else. She told him about the accident that had given her the scar, how a horse had kicked her when she was 10, and everyone had told her how lucky she was to survive, how ugly the wound had been at first. She told him about her parents dying of influenza when she was 16, about the years of loneliness that followed. She told him about the men who had courted her briefly before finding excuses to disappear, about the slow way she had stopped hoping for love. "They were fools," Russell said fiercely. "Every single one of them." They were sitting by the river on a Sunday afternoon in October, the leaves just starting to turn gold and red. Russell had his arm around her shoulders and Dorothy was leaning into his warmth, feeling safer than she could remember feeling in years. "Maybe I needed them to be fools," Dorothy said thoughtfully. "Because if any of them had stayed, I would not be here now. I would not have gotten on that train. I would not have met you." Russell turned her face toward him gently. "Do you believe in fate?" "I did not used to, but now I think maybe I do." He kissed her then, really kissed her, his lips soft and sure against hers. Dorothy melted into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast beneath her palms, could feel the way he trembled slightly as if he could not quite believe this was real. When they finally pulled apart, Russell rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Dorothy Lambert." "I did not think I would ever say those words to anyone again, but I love you." Tears sprang to Dorothy's eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too, so much it scares me." "We will be scared together," Russell said, echoing his words from their first dinner. "And maybe the fear will get smaller as we go." As October faded into November, Dorothy felt herself transforming. The lonely, resigned woman who had stepped off the train in Fort Smith was disappearing, replaced by someone who smiled easily and laughed often. Her students adored her, the townspeople respected her, and Russell loved her. It felt like a miracle, but not everything was perfect. Dorothy noticed that some of the women in town, particularly the younger ones who had set their caps for Russell, treated her with thinly veiled hostility. She overheard comments about how she had trapped Russell with her sad story, about how he was only with her out of pity. The words stung more than she wanted to admit. One afternoon in late November, she was walking home from the schoolhouse when she encountered Violet Morrison, the daughter of one of the wealthiest ranchers in the area. Violet was beautiful, with golden hair and perfect features, and she had made it clear she thought Russell should have chosen her. "Miss Lambert," Violet said with false sweetness, "I have been meaning to ask you, when is Russell going to come to his senses and realize he is making a mistake?" Dorothy stopped walking and turned to face the younger woman directly. "If you have something to say to me, say it plainly." "Fine. You are not pretty enough, not exciting enough, not good enough for him. Everyone knows he is with you because he feels sorry for you. When he gets tired of playing hero, he will realize what he is missing and leave you for someone more suitable." The words hit their mark, striking at Dorothy's deepest insecurities. But instead of crumbling, she felt something fierce rise up in her. Russell Kane is a grown man who makes his own choices. He chose me, not because he pities me, but because we understand each other. We have both known loss and loneliness, and we have both found something worth holding on to. If you spent less time being jealous and more time working on your own character, perhaps you would find someone who values you too. Violet's pretty face flushed red. How dare you? I dare because I am done letting people make me feel small. Dorothy's voice was steady and strong. Russell loves me, and I love him, and no amount of spite from you or anyone else is going to change that. She walked away without waiting for a response, her heart pounding. When she reached her cabin, she found Russell waiting for her on the steps, and one look at her face told him something had happened. "What is wrong?" he asked immediately, standing up and taking her hands. Dorothy told him about the encounter with Violet, and she watched his jaw tighten with anger. "I will talk to her." "No," Dorothy said firmly. "I handled it myself, and I am proud that I did. But Russell, I need to know something. Do you ever regret choosing me? Do you ever look at women like Violet and wish you had made a different choice?" "Never," Russell said immediately. "Dorothy, look at me. I do not care that Violet Morrison is pretty. She is also vain and shallow and unkind, and I would rather spend 5 minutes with you than a lifetime with someone like her. You are the one I want. You are the one I choose. You are the one I love." "I love you too," Dorothy whispered, and when he kissed her, she believed him completely. As December arrived and brought the first snow, Russell started spending more time at Dorothy's cabin in the evenings. They were always proper, keeping the door open when he visited, but Dorothy could feel the tension growing between them. The kisses lasted longer. The touches lingered. She wanted more, wanted everything, but she also wanted to do things right. On Christmas Eve, Russell came to her cabin carrying a small package wrapped in brown paper. The schoolhouse was closed for the holiday, and Dorothy had been preparing a simple meal for the two of them. "I have something for you," Russell said, setting the package on her table. "Open it." Inside was a beautiful shawl, deep blue wool with delicate embroidery along the edges. It was the finest thing Dorothy had ever owned, and tears sprang to her eyes. "Russell, this is too much." "No, it is not. But there is something else." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Dorothy's breath caught as he dropped to one knee in front of her. "Dorothy Lambert, I know we have only known each other for a few months, but they have been the best months of my life. You have brought light back into a world that had gone dark. You have made me believe in second chances. You have made me believe in love again." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold band with a small sapphire. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that forever can mean together?" Dorothy was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. Yes, 1,000 times yes." Russell stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms and kissed her deeply. Dorothy clung to him, hardly able to believe this was real, that she was really going to marry this wonderful man who saw her as beautiful and precious. "How soon?" she asked breathlessly when they finally pulled apart. "How soon can we get married?" Russell laughed. Eager. "I have waited my whole life for you. I do not want to wait any longer than necessary." "New Year's Day," Russell suggested. "That gives us a week to make arrangements. We can have a small ceremony at the church with our friends there, unless you want something bigger." "No, small is perfect. Small and simple and just us." They spent the rest of Christmas Eve making plans, and Dorothy felt as though she were floating. She was going to be married. She was going to be Russell's wife. She was going to have the family and home she had always dreamed of. The week before the wedding passed in a happy blur. Mrs. Chen helped Dorothy make a new dress, pale yellow cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. The women of the town who had befriended Dorothy threw her a small party and gave her practical gifts for married life. dish towels and preserves, and a beautiful quilt. Even Violet Morrison had the grace to offer stiff congratulations, though she did not attend any of the celebrations. Russell was busy making arrangements, too. He had been living in a small room behind the sheriff's office, but he had rented a proper house on Garrison Avenue, a little white house with a porch and a garden. He spent the week before the wedding getting it ready, painting the walls and building furniture, determined to have it perfect for Dorothy. On New Year's Eve, the night before the wedding, Dorothy could barely sleep. She lay in her cabin bed staring at the ceiling, touching the ring on her finger over and over, afraid she might wake up and find it had all been a dream. But when morning came, it was all still real. Mrs. Chen arrived early to help Dorothy dress and arrange her hair. She wove small white flowers into Dorothy's brown hair and stepped back to admire her work. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Chen said with a warm smile. "Russell is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Dorothy said, but she was smiling too. The ceremony was simple and perfect. Dorothy walked into the small church to find Russell waiting for her at the altar, looking handsome in a new suit. Tom and Jack stood beside him, and Sarah Chen and Emma Harrison served as Dorothy's attendants. The pews were filled with the friends they had made, people who had welcomed Dorothy into their community and come to care for both of them. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, and Dorothy hardly heard the words. She was too busy looking at Russell, at the love and joy shining in his gray eyes. When the Reverend said Russell could kiss his bride, he cupped Dorothy's scarred face in both hands and kissed her with such tenderness that several women in the audience cried. "I love you, Mrs. Kane," Russell whispered against her lips. "I love you too," Dorothy whispered back. The reception was held at the hotel with food and music and dancing. Dorothy had never danced much before, but Russell guided her through the steps with patient grace, holding her close and whispering in her ear about how beautiful she was, how happy he was, how he could not wait to start their life together. As the sun began to set, Russell took Dorothy's hand. "Ready to see your new home?" They walked together to the little white house on Garrison Avenue, and Russell swept Dorothy up into his arms to carry her over the threshold. She laughed, feeling young and carefree in a way she never had before. Russell set her down gently in the middle of the front room, and Dorothy looked around at what was now her home. Russell had done wonders with the place. The walls were freshly painted, the floors scrubbed clean. There was a sofa and 2 chairs near the fireplace, a table with 4 chairs in the dining area, and through the doorway Dorothy could see a bed with a beautiful quilt spread across it. "Russell, it is perfect," she said, turning to face him. "Everything is perfect." He pulled her close, his hands resting on her waist. "I want to make you happy, Dorothy. Every single day for the rest of our lives I want to make you happy." "You already do," she said, reaching up to cup his face in her hands, "just by being you." He kissed her then, and the kiss was different from all the ones that had come before. There was passion in it, desire, and the promise of what was to come. Dorothy responded eagerly, her fingers threading through his hair, her body pressing against his. "Are you nervous?" Russell asked softly, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "A little," Dorothy admitted, "but mostly I am just happy. I am with you and everything else will work itself out." Russell lifted her into his arms again and carried her to the bedroom, and Dorothy let herself fall into the moment, into the joy of being loved and wanted and cherished. She had spent so long thinking she would be alone forever, but Russell had proved that forever could mean together, and she was going to spend the rest of her life showing him how grateful she was for that gift. The months that followed were the happiest of Dorothy's life. She continued teaching at the schoolhouse, and Russell continued his work as deputy, but their evenings and Sundays belonged to each other. They worked together in the garden, planting vegetables for the spring. They sat together on the porch and watched the sun set. They made love with increasing confidence and passion, learning each other's bodies and hearts. In March, Dorothy began to feel unwell in the mornings. At first she thought it was something she had eaten, but when the nausea continued for a week, Mrs. Chen suggested she might be pregnant. Dorothy went to see Dr. Williams, who confirmed that she was indeed expecting a baby, due sometime in late October. When she told Russell that evening, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "A baby. We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Dorothy asked, though she could see the answer on his face. Happy does not even begin to cover it. Russell set her down gently and placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "I never thought I would get this chance again, to be a father. Thank you, Dorothy. Thank you for giving me this." "We are giving it to each other," Dorothy said, covering his hand with hers. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Dorothy continued teaching through the spring term, finally stopping in June when the summer break began and she was starting to show. Russell became even more protective of her, fretting over her health and insisting she rest more than she wanted to. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Dorothy told him with exasperated affection when he tried to carry her to bed one evening even though she was perfectly capable of walking. "I know, but I want to take care of you. Let me take care of you." How could she argue with that? In late July, Tom Miller came to Russell with a proposition. His foreman had quit unexpectedly, and Tom needed someone he could trust to help manage his ranch while he dealt with some business in St. Louis. Would Russell consider taking a temporary leave from his deputy duties to help out? The pay would be generous, and it would give Russell and Dorothy a financial cushion for when the baby arrived. Russell was reluctant to leave his deputy work, but the money was appealing, especially with a child on the way. He talked it over with Dorothy, and she encouraged him to take the opportunity. "It is only for 2 months," she said, "and Tom is a good friend. You should help him." So Russell took the job, and through August and September he worked on Tom's ranch while Dorothy prepared the house for the baby. She set up a cradle in their bedroom, sewed tiny clothes, and accepted hand-me-downs and advice from the mothers in town. Mrs. Chen was particularly helpful, bringing over baby items her own children had outgrown and sharing wisdom about caring for infants. Russell came home every evening dusty and tired from the ranch work, but his eyes always lit up when he saw Dorothy. He would wash up and then spend hours talking to her swollen belly, telling their unborn child stories and making promises about the life they would have together. "I cannot wait to meet you," Russell would say, his hand resting on Dorothy's stomach. "I cannot wait to show you the world and teach you everything I know. I cannot wait to watch you grow up and become your own person. But most of all, I cannot wait to love you the way your mother and I already do." Dorothy would run her fingers through Russell's hair and feel so full of love she thought she might burst. This was what she had always wanted, this sense of belonging and family and home. This was what she had traveled all the way from Boston to find, even though she had not known it at the time. On October 20th, Dorothy went into labor in the early morning hours. Russell sent for the doctor and Mrs. Chen, then held Dorothy's hand through the contractions, his face pale with worry. "You are doing so well," he kept telling her. "You are so strong. I am so proud of you." The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours. There were moments when Dorothy thought she could not do it, could not push anymore, could not keep going. But Russell never left her side, and Mrs. Cheng coached her through each contraction with firm patience, and finally, as the sun was setting, the baby arrived. "It is a boy," Dr. Williams announced, holding up the squalling infant. a healthy boy with good lungs. Russell was crying as the doctor placed their son in Dorothy's arms. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with dark hair and eyes that would probably turn gray like his father's. He was perfect. "Hello, little one," Dorothy whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have been waiting for you." Russell leaned down and kissed Dorothy's forehead, then gently touched their son's tiny hand. The baby's fingers wrapped around Russell's finger instinctively, and Russell let out a shaky laugh. "What should we name him?" Dorothy asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on anything definite. Now, looking down at their son, Russell said, "What about James? James Russell Kane, we can call him James." "James," Dorothy repeated, testing the name. "Yes, that is perfect. Hello, James." The next few weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. James was a fussy baby who needed to eat frequently and did not sleep for long stretches. Dorothy was constantly tired, and Russell did everything he could to help, changing diapers and walking the floor with James when he cried at night. "You do not have to do all this," Dorothy told Russell one night as he paced the bedroom with James over his shoulder. "I can handle it." "I want to," Russell said firmly. "He is my son too, and you need rest. We are partners in this, remember." Dorothy felt her heart swell with love for this man who was such a good father, who took his responsibilities so seriously, who never complained about the sleepless nights or the endless demands of a newborn. As James grew and became less fussy, life settled into a new rhythm. Dorothy took a year off from teaching to care for their son, though she missed her students and the schoolroom. Russell returned to his deputy work, but he always made sure to spend time with James every day, playing with him and teaching him to smile and laugh. By James's first birthday, Dorothy was ready to return to teaching. Mrs. Chen offered to watch James during the school day, and Russell supported whatever Dorothy wanted to do. So she went back to the schoolhouse, happy to return to work she loved while also being a mother. The years passed in a blur of happiness. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy with his father's gray eyes and his mother's love of books. When he was 3, Dorothy became pregnant again, and this time she gave birth to a daughter they named Alice Margaret Kane. Alice was the opposite of her brother, sunny and outgoing and constantly in motion. Russell adored both his children equally, and Dorothy would often find him reading to them in the evenings or playing games in the yard. When James was 8 and Alice was 5, Dorothy realized she was pregnant once more. She had thought she was done having children, but apparently life had other plans. This pregnancy was harder than the previous 2, and at 35, Dorothy felt every ache and pain more acutely. "Maybe this is our last one," she said to Russell one evening as he rubbed her swollen feet. "Whatever you want," Russell said. "Though I have got to admit, I love our family just the way it is, and I will love it with one more addition too." In January of 1886, Dorothy gave birth to another son, whom they named Thomas after Russell's good friend. Thomas was a calm baby, easy to care for, and James and Alice were thrilled to have a little brother to dote on. Life in Fort Smith had changed over the years. The town had grown, new businesses had opened, and the wild lawlessness that had characterized the early days was slowly being tamed. Russell eventually became the sheriff, taking over when the previous sheriff retired. Dorothy became known as one of the best teachers in Arkansas, and students came from miles around to attend her school. Through it all, Russell and Dorothy's love only deepened. They had their disagreements, of course, and there were hard times when money was tight or when one of the children was sick. But they faced everything together, just as they had promised they would on their wedding day. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Russell took Dorothy back to the spot by the Arkansas River where he had first told her he loved her. The children were staying with the Chens for the evening, and Russell had packed a picnic dinner. "You remember this place?" Russell asked as they sat on a blanket watching the sun set over the water. "Of course I do. This is where everything changed for me. This is where I realized I was not going to be alone forever." Russell took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her wedding ring. "Do you remember what you said to me that day on the train platform, when I first found you waiting? I said I was waiting for someone who was not coming. And you were right. Harold Patterson did not come, but I came instead, and I will keep coming, Dorothy. Every single day for the rest of my life I will be there for you. That is what forever means to me." Dorothy leaned her head on Russell's shoulder, feeling peaceful and content. "I used to think forever meant being alone. I had accepted it, had made my peace with it. But you showed me that forever could mean something completely different. Forever could mean love and family and home. Forever could mean together." "Forever does mean together," Russell said, tilting her face up to kiss her. "For us, that is exactly what forever means." They sat by the river until the stars came out, talking about their life and their children and their dreams for the future. They talked about how James wanted to be a lawyer like Judge Parker, how Alice wanted to run a store like the Chens, how little Thomas was still too young to know what he wanted, but showed signs of being as steady and reliable as his father. "We have built a good life," Dorothy said. "Better than I ever imagined possible." "We built it together," Russell corrected. "Everything we have, everything we are, we created together." As they walked home hand in hand through the quiet streets of Fort Smith, Dorothy thought about the scared, lonely woman who had stepped off the train all those years ago. She thought about how she had believed her life was over, how she had given up on happiness and hope. And she thought about how wrong she had been, because Russell had proved that it was never too late for love, never too late for second chances, never too late to find the place where you belonged. He had proved that the future could be better than the past, that wounds could heal, that lonely hearts could find each other even in the most unexpected ways. The years continued to pass. James grew up and did indeed become a lawyer, working alongside some of the most respected legal minds in Arkansas. Alice shocked everyone by deciding to become a teacher like her mother, taking over Dorothy's classroom when Dorothy finally retired at age 50. Thomas followed in his father's footsteps and became a lawman, serving as a deputy and eventually as marshal. Russell and Dorothy watched their children grow and marry and have children of their own. They became grandparents 6 times over, and their house was always full of noise and laughter when the family gathered for Sunday dinners. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the whole town of Fort Smith threw them a celebration. Mayor Harrison gave a speech about how Russell and Dorothy had become pillars of the community, how their love and dedication to each other and to the town had made Fort Smith a better place. When Dorothy arrived here in 1880, she was a stranger in a strange land, Mayor Harrison said. And Russell was a man still healing from old wounds, but they found each other, and in finding each other, they found themselves. They built a family, they served this community, and they showed all of us what true love looks like. Fort Smith is lucky to have them. Dorothy stood beside Russell, holding his hand, feeling the weight of all those years and all that love. Her hair was streaked with gray now, and Russell's face had lines she had helped put there with 25 years of laughter and joy. But when she looked at him, she still saw the man who had offered her help when she needed it most, who had seen past her scars to the woman underneath, who had chosen her over and over again every single day. "What are you thinking?" Russell asked softly as the party continued around them. "I am thinking about how I almost did not get on that train. I almost stayed in Boston, almost gave up completely, And then I would have missed all of this. I would have missed you. But you did get on the train. You took a chance, even when you were scared and had every reason not to. That is why I fell in love with you, Dorothy, because you are brave enough to keep trying even when life has beaten you down. We saved each other, Dorothy said. I could not have built this life without you, and I could not have built it without you. Russell kissed her hand. Here is to 25 more years. They did not get 25 more years, but they got close. Russell passed away in his sleep at age 71, his heart simply stopping after a lifetime of faithful service. Dorothy held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful that he went peacefully, without pain or fear. At his funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives Russell had touched. Former outlaws he had arrested but treated with dignity. Children he had helped when they were in trouble. Families he had protected. The whole town of Fort Smith turned out to say goodbye to a man they had loved and respected. Dorothy stood beside his grave with their children and grandchildren surrounding her, and she thought about all the years they had shared. She thought about the love that had sustained them through good times and bad. She thought about the promise Russell had made to her on their 10th anniversary, that he would be there for her every single day for the rest of his life. He had kept that promise. Dorothy lived for 3 more years after Russell died. Years she spent with her children and grandchildren. Years she spent teaching one last group of students. Years she spent writing down the story of her life so that future generations would know how she and Russell had found each other. On a warm September afternoon, almost exactly 43 years after she had first arrived in Fort Smith, Dorothy sat down in her rocking chair on the porch of the little white house she had shared with Russell and closed her eyes. She thought about the mail-order bride who had believed she would be alone forever. She thought about the cowboy who had proved that forever could mean together. She thought about a love that had lasted across decades and through every trial life had thrown at them. And then Dorothy Lambert Kane took one last breath and let herself drift away, knowing that wherever Russell was, he was waiting for her, ready to spend forever together just like they always had. When Dorothy's grandchildren went through her things after the funeral, they found a journal she had kept, filled with memories and stories. On the last page, written in her careful handwriting, were these words: "I came to Fort Smith expecting nothing and found everything. I thought my life was ending, but it was really just beginning. To anyone reading this who feels alone or lost or like their chance for happiness has passed, do not give up. Get on the train. Take the risk. Say yes to the possibility of love. Because somewhere out there is someone who will see you the way Russell saw me, who will love you the way I loved him, who will prove that forever does not have to mean alone. Forever can mean together, if you are brave enough to let it." The journal was passed down through the family, from generation to generation, a reminder of the love story that had started it all. And in Fort Smith, people still told the story of the mail-order bride and the cowboy, the woman who thought she would be alone forever, and the man who proved that forever could mean together, right up until the very end.